10 a.m. EDT. So we've gone live. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Green Hope's webinar on the relevance of peace in the post-pandemic era. My name is Kehkashan, and I'm the founder president of Green Hope Foundation, and I will be your moderator for this panel. A huge welcome to all of our panelists who really don't need any introduction. They are icons whose missions are to foster peace and harmony globally and just make our world a better place to live in. And I've known each of them personally, and we are so blessed to have them today under one roof. Now, in the last few years, the work Green Hope Foundation has been doing in various communities, especially in the marginalized ones, has made me realize how fortunate I was to grow up in a society where we can take peace for granted. But the reality is that this is starkly different for millions of people, young and old, whose lives are decimated by conflict, violence, abuse. Because peace is not just a five-letter word. It is the foundation stone for our future. And today we have some of the world's most eminent experts on this subject to share their vision and experiences on the critical importance of enhanced relevance of peace building, of conflict resolution, and the nuclear disarmament movement in the post-pandemic era. They will elaborate on how much responsibility rests with governments, the private sector, and civil society, especially young people, to bring about peace in the world and how they visualize a post-COVID-19 world. So without any further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Madam Audrey Kitagawa, who is the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Parliament of the World's Religions. She is the first woman to hold this position in the history of the Parliament of the World's Religions. So Madam Kitagawa, the floor is yours.
I have to unmute myself. So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the introduction. It's really wonderful to see friends on this broadcast, and my deepest appreciation to Kehkashan and the Green Hope Foundation for making this broadcast possible. First of all, while obvious reference is being made to the current pandemic of COVID-19, we must take cognizance of the increasing viral and insect-borne diseases with which the world has and continues to face. But just within the last 20 years, we have seen SARS, H1N1, MERS, polio uptakes, Ebola, increases in Lyme disease, Zika, and now COVID-19. And I think it's very important for us to see what these diseases are showing us. And I think it's very important for us to reflect upon our individual and collective behaviors that have causal relationship with these diseases and the great damage which we are causing the environment. And two, the connection between our incursion into the destruction of the rainforests and the interactions between humans and animals that are causative to these animal to people pathogenic transfers. And UNEP's Interfaith Rainforest Initiative has really helped us to see that we must raise awareness about our need to protect these rainforests because they are neither remote nor removed from our daily lives, because what happens to the rainforest visits us all to our front doors. And the polarizations which we have seen resultant from this pandemic along racial lines, with Black and Latino communities being severely affected, people of Asian heritage being accused, harassed, and marginalized during this pandemic because it purportedly started in Wuhan, China, and along gender lines with substantially increased incidences of violence against women who remain with abusive significant others during this prolonged period of social isolation, and groups that are pushing for the reopening of the economy despite warnings from the health professionals. All of these have created fault lines that are placing increased stressors on people. Therefore, it is of significant importance that we join together to show our solidarity and work cooperatively to fashion solutions. And this does require processes of inclusivity and stepping out of our own insularities to engage across disciplines, racial, gender, and political divides. While we may not agree with each other, we can agree to disagree, but respectfully, and still see the need to solve the challenges before us together. And we must also have proper analysis of causative factors to these challenges and see what remedies can be addressed at the level of causation while simultaneously handling the symptoms which have arisen from the source of the problem. So, I'd like to, you also mention about the responsibility of governments, private sector, civil society, to bring about peace in the world as well as young people. And I really feel that responsibility ultimately rests with each individual to have peace within our own hearts and minds, and to have a spiritual discipline and practice that guides our daily conduct in thought, speech, and actions. Who we are as individuals, we bring to the collective world in which we live. So the society, therefore, is the reflection of the collective consciousness of all the individuals that reside within it. All governments, businesses, and civil society organizations are comprised of individuals. So no matter what the overall sector we may be talking about, the common denominator will always be the individual who occupies a place in that external structure. And these individuals must then be responsible to adhere to the duties and responsibilities provided to them in their participation, whether as employees or employers, as activists, advocates, as the holders of any position in any level of government. So undergirding the foundation of the individual, the group, the government should always be ethical principles and sound values that guide our behavior. What faith traditions have historically attempted to do is to give the spiritual, moral, ethical codes of conduct to help guide the behaviors of adherents. So the role of government may be to provide the institutional infrastructures through which laws can be passed, the judicial mechanisms can be used to enforce the laws, to preserve order and domestic peace, and defend against perceived external enemies, manage economic conditions, and ensure the protection of public goods. So governments set the policies, can ensure the rule of law for an orderly, stable society. And its role is crucial to ensuring domestic and international peace. Again, boiling this down to the individual, since governments are run by individuals. When you have a leader who is untruthful, self-interested, and is far removed from a moral or ethical grounding in sound values, the health and safety of the entire country is jeopardized. So leadership places one in an especially important position of having to have a sound ethical code and adherence to sound codes of conduct and values. And of course, the role of civil society is to maintain its vibrancy and bring communities together for collective action, mobilizing society to set forth demands and to be agents of advocacy and activism on the local, national, and international levels. So the participation of people in public affairs through private and public platforms can influence public opinion and restore just and humane treatment where injustice has occurred. And the role of our youth, and of course the importance of your own foundation, Kakashan, as well as yourself, is to lay the groundwork to take on important roles in the resolution of conflicts within their communities, to be peace-building actors that ultimately strengthen the democratic governance and help solve problems at the local and national levels. So they should bring new perspective and fresh insights that go hand in hand with their capacity to keep up with all of the new technological changes that are swiftly changing the ways in which we interact with each other, participate in the public commons, and moderate the public-private spheres of the lives of citizens. And with respect to your question about what is our vision for the post-COVID-19 world, well, this pandemic has literally created a pause, a cessation of our daily lives, as we have become conditioned to a great deal of busyness and running hither and yon, whether to catch airplanes, go to work, school, events, meetings, and so forth. And in the stopping of our busyness, the skies became clearer. The birds could be heard chirping even in Manhattan, and the streets were empty of traffic and people, and we became still and silent. We found different ways to be together, which our contemporary technologies, of course, have helped us to provide these avenues of connectivity, which in a virtual way, but of course in a virtual way, and to be human is to love and to be loved. And this inherent capacity will allow us to become greater expressions of this love in ways that we never imagined possible. We are really social beings, so we will always strive to maintain our connectivity. And we had to learn to grow in patience as our routines and daily habits were modified. We have to practice flexibility to be able to adapt to the ever-changing and impermanent external world. If we live simpler lives, our ability to adapt would be greater because we would be less bogged down with so many things. And our need to survive as biological organisms are really actually nominal. Everything over and above having our basic needs met speaks to the level of our desire. May this simplified world bring us greater peace and a return to importance of values of love, compassion, and caring for each other. Cooperation, not competition. Love, not hate. Compassion and caring, not selfishness. And may everyone be blessed with peace, love, good health, and happiness.
Thank you so much, Madam Kira. That was so inspiring. And thank you so much for highlighting the importance of love, of compassion, and of course of peace in such trying times, but also highlighting the specific roles the government, private sector, civil society, and young people have to play, and how that all needs to come together and work together to create this peaceful, sustainable world. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is the Right Reverend William Swing, President and Founding Trustee of United Religions Initiative and former Episcopal Bishop of California. Bishop Swing, you have the floor. Bishop Swing, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. While we've been going through this time of COVID-19, a couple of words have meant a lot to me. One of the words, or the combination, is herd immunity. I don't think I'd ever heard that term before. And it's used now in terms of, well, if we could all get the virus, we could have enough antibodies as a herd of people to keep it away. But I was thinking also, if I took that term, as a group of human beings, what are we immune to that we don't even recognize that we're immune to? I think the pandemic has given us a chance to get outside ourselves and look back at ourselves to say, what a dirty world we created. What frantically driven lives we've been leading. How far have we separated ourselves from each other in terms of concern for people's education, welfare, healthcare, etc. I think about nuclear weapons a lot, and I think about what are we immune to? The young people of the world maybe have grown up with a herd immunity to understand the threat that's out there. Maybe the politicians and the talk about weapons keeping us secure, and the military-industrial complex have won the day, maybe, in terms of granting or cultivating herd immunity so that we don't understand the real problem that nuclear weapons is directing at us and every day. So I think about how to step back and say, when as this winds itself down and we change again, we've got to change in terms of the environment. There's just we cannot go back to what's going on in the government, what's going on in pollution. When this is over, we've got to finish off nuclear abolition. Up to now, people say, well, I believe that someday we ought to get rid of the nuclear weapons, but not now, not in my lifetime. Well, in whose lifetime? There's not going to be a lifetime if it isn't now. And then just the way we live our lives. I think all of us have, it's like being on a retreat, a spiritual retreat, where you just go back to basics of who you are and what you're on this planet for, and what kind of internal resources are you developing for yourself that could be of use to people out in the world. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is herd immunity, and the other word that keeps coming up to me is the word oneness. Oneness. I'm from West Virginia, so I think about West Virginia. I'm a West Virginian. And then I think, well, I'm a Californian. Well, I'm a citizen of the United States. I'm an American. West Virginia first, California first, America first. Come on, there's a oneness out there. The wonderful thing about the coronavirus is that there's a oneness in the world for a minute, where we all have one enemy, we all have one fear, we all have one hope for life. There's a oneness. If there's no sense of oneness, then why do nuclear disarmament? Why do environment? The opposite of oneness is kind of meanness. It's me, my, our. The security, the drive for security. The only real security, ultimately, is in the oneness. If it isn't good for everybody, ultimately, it's not going to be good for me. So there are many coronavirus epidemics or pandemics going on. The nurse has one look at it. A person in Hawaii on an island has another look at it. In Burlingame, California, I've got another look at it. It's not hard on me. I work till about 3 o'clock and I garden for a couple hours. I don't mind not moving around so much. As a matter of fact, this is kind of nice. But I know there's suffering. uh, the issue, I guess, internally is, can you share in the sufferings that are going on? Do you have a heart that can imagine what it's, even for a little bit, to imagine what it's like to be in Yemen, to try to keep a family together in Somalia, being in a refugee camp in Jordan, that I may know him and share in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, is a mantra that goes through my brain from time to time. So it's it's a reflective time. The whole world is taking a retreat, and that's good. So those are my initial comments.
Thank you very much, Bishop Swing, and thank you also for emphasizing the oneness and how COVID-19 has affected all of us, albeit in different ways, but it has brought out that oneness in humanity. So thank you so much for your words. Mm-hmm. Our next speaker is Mr. Jonathan Granoff, a lawyer, a screenwriter, and lecturer who is the president of the Global Security Institute. Mr. Granoff, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for Green Hope for giving us hope. Some of us are kind of a little bit older than you, and it is youth like yourself that give us enormous hope. The theme we're talking about is peace in the world after the virus. What have we learned from the virus? One, we've learned that the suffering of the lack of health anywhere can affect everyone everywhere. These viruses that we're talking about and the pandemic diseases do not carry passports. This fact was known. It was known. All the scientists were telling the politicians for years. A pandemic is inevitable. We just don't know when it's going to happen. But their calls for increasing human security were unheeded. Now there has to be a response to it. We know, the scientists are telling us, like the pandemic, there will be dramatic adverse effects from our irresponsible behavior toward the climate. It seems sort of abstract. Let's call it our excessive burning of fossil fuel to produce goods and services in an ever-expanding economy without reference to the rules of the natural world. We know that that's going to cause tremendous disruptions with respect to resources like water, or the safety and security of cities on the coastlines. The very truth that parts of the world, if we continue, will become uninhabitably hot. Desertification. We just don't know when it's going to hit at a point like the virus has hit, where there will be such disruptions in the creative capacity of the human community to feed itself. We don't know, but we know that if we don't prepare, we won't be prepared. We know that the model through which we've been pursuing security and peace amongst the nations of the world is disconnected from the reality of how people live. So we've been pursuing security based on a model of the security of the state without reference to the security of people. And this pandemic disease shows us exactly how this distortion is affecting us. So the amount of spending on pursuing security through threat of the use of force by states is hovering around $1.7 trillion, which, by the way, is around the same amount that the United States president has pledged will be spent in the coming years to upgrade and make more efficient the threat of nuclear weapons. An absurd example of the wrong bus. In other words, the more we spend on these weapons, the less security we actually get. It's a strange phenomena where the purpose of pursuing security is undermined by the method through which it's being pursued, because it's wrong. If we took a small percentage of that budget, 10%, we could solve many of the problems that are facing us: climate, elimination of poverty, and have a really robust global health system. But I don't think it's just an issue of changing money, because that would argue that if we had enough money for both, we could continue the profligate and insane spending on these weapons. It's something deeper. It's how do we pursue security? Do we pursue security based on fear and the desire to protect institutions that we've created? Or do we pursue security based on realism? Not based on a realism, a point of reference being the actual world as it is. Now, the world as it is borderless. We've seen this from outer space. The world as it is seems to be more in thinking of the virus. It doesn't care about your religion, your gender, your status, your wealth, your nation. It just looks at you as a human being. So we need to have a concept that's appropriate to the way the world actually is. It's one living system. And there are living systems that we cannot ignore. We cannot ignore the health of the oceans. If we do, 50 to 70% of our oxygen supply could be cut off, because we get that from the phytoplankton that depends on the health of the oceans. We cannot ignore the health of the rainforests. We cannot ignore the health of the human community. So we need to think, are we going to be realistic, or are we going to continue with the myth of pursuing security through militarism? Now, militarism rests on two myths. One myth is strategic stability. We'll have a balance of terror between the states with nuclear weapons. That's mythical. You can't measure it. When do you get strategic stability? There's no metrics for it. The other is military superiority, which is another doctrine that's pursued that's contrary to strategic stability. But again, it's a myth. It did not prove successful for Alexander the Great in Afghanistan, nor the Soviet Union there, nor NATO, nor the United States in Vietnam. This pursuit of military superiority as a way of obtaining security is, again, immeasurable and mythical. Whereas protecting the oceans, measurable. Protecting the climate, measurable. Protecting the rainforest, the water table, all measurable. Eliminating poverty, all measurable. Some people say, well, maybe that's not realistic politically. But let me just give one simple example. Polio. Even during the height of the Cold War, because of the efforts of the World Health Organization, the Soviet Union and the United States, which viewed themselves as existential enemies, pointing thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons on hair-trigger alert at each other each day, cooperated. Scientists cooperated. And we have virtually eliminated polio. Over 99% of it has been eliminated. It only exists, I think, in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and I forget one other country. But it was an ongoing threat to the human community. It then created a cooperation with civil society like the Rotary International. But it was mainly the recognition of the leaders of countries that this issue required cooperation. I think that in today's world, this spirit of cooperation and redefinition of security based on realism, not myth, and based on the realism that the climate and the planet is one, the human community is one, has to become part of the fabric of how we pursue security. And that's realism, and that's very important. That's science. The other side of this, and I call it human security, is we're human beings, and human beings are a very unique species on the planet because we have a moral calling. We have a spiritual nature as well. We have the capacity of selfless, universal love. We have a capacity for this. And thus, if we neglect to bring our moral insights and our capacity our capacity to be fully human into our values, we end up with distortions. Now, the clearest articulation in ethics of that deep insight of the unity of life and the unity of the human family is the golden rule. So if you want to have personal peace and security, you have to apply the golden rule in your family, in your community, and in yourself. You have to treat yourself with the kindness you want to treat others with, and you have to treat others with the kindness that you want to be treated with. And nations have to apply the golden rule. It's true at every level. Nuclear weapons, I think, are a gross example of violating it. The idea that 9 countries will say, these weapons are good for us, but not good for you. If they're good, they'd be good for everybody, but everyone knows that's absurd. So if you think of the golden rule, we need to apply it that nations must treat other nations as they want to be treated. And what the virus tells us is we have both a moral, as I've stated, in terms of the universal norm of the golden rule found in every religion, and we have a practical necessity to view the health of the human community as one. As the Master Jesus said, love the Creator with all your heart and all your soul, all your might. And like unto that, something you can see, treat your neighbor as yourself. And in today's world, neighborhood is not a geographic location, it's a moral location. For the virus, it's geographic, it's the whole planet. For every one of us, we have to see that our neighbor is the poorest of the poor, the people most affected by the climate change and the virus, and the richest of the rich. They may be rich in money, but they're poor in values. And so we have to see the human community as one. And these truths are not new. They don't come from the virus. They come from the very architecture in which we as human beings are created. We are created to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's the solution. It's not new, and it's not far from anybody. It's found right in the fabric of our conscience. And that's where it starts. Your conscience and my conscience. By the way, there's actually even an International Day of Conscience the UN has declared. I think it's pretty amazing, I think. And of course, the UN system needs to be reinvigorated. That's the institutional context for many of these, solution of many of these problems. But it always begins, all of these problems as well as solutions begins in the quiet interior of every one of our hearts. And this moment of reflection is a moment of great value and great warning and great opportunity. I pray that we seize the opportunity to pursue our full humanity.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and thank you for bringing up the importance of the golden rule and how it's so applicable to every single one of us. And I think it's really sad that we're talking more about loving each other and oneness in times like these, when, as you said, this is like the oneness and loving one another and compassion has always been there as an intrinsic part of humanity. So, but it's better late than never. So I'm glad that we are having this discussion and we're taking steps and making progress towards actually achieving that peaceful world and achieving inner peace.
We have to at some point focus on how our values are expressed with our funding. And every politician needs to be asked, what are you doing to stop this military madness? What are you doing to get rid of nuclear weapons? What are you doing to protect our health, the health of the planet and the health of people? What are you doing to eliminate poverty? Every politician needs to be asked these questions.
Absolutely. And I think that is one of the keys: accountability, transparency. they're so important in, well, always, and especially in this age and time. So thank you so much for bringing up that very crucial point. Thank you once again, Jonathan. Our next speaker is Dr. Iya Dabamogli, who is the Senior Principal Advisor of United Nations Environment Program and founder of Faith for Earth. Dr. Iya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kekeshan, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I am very blessed, as usual, to be with this group of eminent people. And thank you, Kekeshan, for initiating this webinar. We're always proud of what you do. We're proud of your foundation. And I'm always pleased to speak in your meetings and conferences. So if you remember, in 2018, the Security Council said that climate change is the top concern posing a risk to international security. A few days ago, the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, called this crisis, COVID-19, as the gravest test since the founding of the United Nations. Now, the pandemic poses a significant threat to the maintenance of international peace and security, and potentially leading to an increase to social unrest and violence that would greatly undermine abilities to fight the disease. So what I would like to do is to share with you the 8 risks that have been identified by the UN that are of particular concern. The first one is that COVID-19 threatens to further erode trust in public institutions, particularly in countries that have failed their people to respond to the pandemic. Second, the economic fallout of the crisis could create major stresses, particularly in fragile and developing countries. Well, economic instability will have particular devastating impact for women, as have been mentioned, and vulnerable groups and indigenous people. Third, the postponement of elections. We know some countries, because of the lockdown, have postponed elections and referenda and so on. And that can create political tension and undermine legitimacy of the governments. Fourth, in some conflict settings, the uncertainty created by the pandemic and COVID-19 may create incentives for some actors, especially non-state actors, to promote further division among the society. And this could lead to an escalation of the violence. Fifth, the threat of terrorism remains alive, and we need to be careful of that. Terrorist groups may see a window of opportunity to strike while the attention is somehow tailored towards responding to the pandemic. The sixth risk is that the potential of bioterrorists might be something that is emerging, and attacks might unfold that could pose similar devastation to what we are seeing at the global level. And seventh, the crisis has hindered international and regional, of course, and national conflict resolution efforts, because peacemakers cannot move, cannot travel, and cannot meet, and so on. And finally, the eighth risk is that the pandemic is triggering the exacerbating the various human rights challenges that we are already facing. And we are seeing the stigma, the hate speeches, and the white supremacists that have been emerging. So what has been done so far? To respond to these risks, the UN Secretary General called for an immediate global ceasefire and to silence the gun in order to help create conditions for the delivery of aid and, of course, health support by the World Health Organization and other players. The humanitarian community, of course, including civil society organizations and faith-based organizations, have actually mobilized in response to the crisis a lot of support to some communities, especially local communities. The UN has launched what is called the Global Humanitarian Response Fund, focusing on countries that are most in need. The pledge that was made has already received around $400 million, but much more is needed. And the fund is being threatened by the announcement by the US that they will withdraw or withhold funds to the World Health Organization. So there are three priority areas of support where we all can have action and focus on. First, we need to ensure that humanitarian access, especially by governments, and to open corridors of support so the humanitarian aid can reach the local and vulnerable communities. Second, we need to be able to mobilize strong and flexible funding for COVID-19, because not only to respond to health issues, but also to the consequences of the pandemic. And third, we need to protect the most vulnerable people, the women, the young girls, the marginalized groups, and so on. But what can we do actually post-COVID-19? And UNEP has had a number of meetings, and we have synchronized our priorities. And of course, the first thing is we do need to continue supporting the medical and humanitarian emergency. And we need to build the capacity of local communities, national government counterparts, and other players. But importantly, we need to move into a transformational change that serves nature and the people, and creating opportunities for green financing and green finance mechanisms to invest in nature and to safeguard public health. We've heard about the zoonetics and the causes of the disease and the origin of it. So we need to be mindful that 75% of all diseases are actually of zoonotic origins. And thirdly, we need to be able to build back better. So creating stimulus packages, accelerating sustainable consumption and production, and accelerating moving towards renewables and sustainability. So, but in whatever we do, we need to keep the Sustainable Development Goals at the heart and center of all efforts that we need to do. And of course, the major players during these periods are the local communities, because they are most trusted partners by the people, especially in circumstances of lockdown, circumstances of a mistrust between the governments and the people, and so on. So lots can be done. However, we need to be futuristic in our thinking, and we should not allow business to go back to as it used to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iyad. And you're so right. We do need to build back better and create this new normal, not go back to business as usual, but learn from the lessons that this pandemic has taught us, and just see the gross inadequacies that are already present on our planet, and then see how we can build back better and build a better and create a better world. Thank you once again. Our next speaker is Mr. Alan Ware, Global Coordinator of Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. Mr. Allen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kekashan. It's wonderful to be here on this panel. I'm originally from New Zealand. I lived for some time in the United States, particularly in New York, where I was working on a number of issues at the United Nations. And I'm now based in Prague in the Czech Republic. And I just got out of New York and back to Prague just before the lockdown came. So that was like just early March. So it's been like 2 months now we've been in lockdown. Before that, I was traveling to many, many different conferences and very busy. The interesting thing is that I've had just as many meetings, probably more, during the lockdown than before the lockdown. And I think, you know, what this has demonstrated is that we may have physical distancing, and there are a lot of, sad implications in health and people's lives on this, but we haven't really had social distancing. We've had social connection during this pandemic. We've had, through the communication systems and also because of people's great creativity, we have been connecting with each other. And that has been both in what I think you, Kekashan, mentioned and Bill Swing mentioned, is that there's a commonality that we have of all realizing there's something that we need to do together. We have to work through this pandemic together. And it's opening people's up even more to that concept that Jonathan explained a little bit more of human security, that our security is not based on defending ourselves against others, but on achieving common goals for health, for humanity, for our future. So there is a consciousness change that's happening. Now, it's not new. Many of us have been talking about these ideas for a long time and been involved in causes, but the pandemic, I think, has shifted some of that consciousness around the world. And it does give us an opportunity, I think, to build a better world as we come out of the pandemic. It has highlighted that military security cannot protect us from pandemics, that military security cannot protect us from climate change, cannot resolve the environmental issues, cannot resolve the poverty issues. And hold it, how much are we actually spending on this military security? I think Jonathan mentioned $1.9 trillion a year. Phenomenal waste of resources. On nuclear weapons, it's about $100 billion a year. Now, for many people, that's just a whole lot of zeros and doesn't make much sense. So one of the things we need to do is make it a little bit more understandable to people, you know, what an incredible amount of, you know, money and resources this is and how this could really assist in, you know, the other issues. We did one action like that. There will be others I hope we will come up with as well. In October last year, we tried to demonstrate how much the nuclear weapons budget is. Because just saying, you know, $100 billion or $1 trillion for the next 10 years doesn't really register in people. So what we did is we took that nuclear weapons budget for the next 10 years, $1 trillion, and we printed off 1 million notes, each of $1 million. This is one of them. On the front, you see what the money is being spent on the nuclear weapons. On the back, you see what it should be spent on instead, on children, on our future, on health, on climate. So we printed off 1 million of these, and we took them from a mock missile, and we tried counting them out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each of these is $1 million. And each one, as you're counting them, you realize how much money this is. And we had teams of people. We had an art gallery in Manhattan, and we also did countings outside the UN and next to the Gandhi statue and at the Imagine tribute place to John Lennon and other places around the city. But the main counting was done at art gallery. We were counting for 7 days and 7 nights, and we couldn't even get to the $1 trillion with nearly 100 people counting sort of during that time. It's such a phenomenal amount of money. And we filled up baskets. We had 17 baskets, one for each of the Sustainable Development Goals. They got totally filled and overflowing. And that, for us, it was like a revelation how much it is. And we'd already been thinking about it. I think for other people, you know, it makes a difference. So creative education efforts like this are important. We're trying to create another one, a digital version of this that we're planning at the moment to come out later in the year. So that's one thing, educating about what that money could go to instead. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, for example, that could all be implemented if we shifted the money from military, from nuclear weapons. But then how do we do that? One of the real problems is that there's vested interests in the arms race. the military corporations are making money and they are lobbying to continue spending that money. So we're picking again on the nuclear weapons one because that's, in one sense, an easier one than the other military, because nuclear weapons are illegal, they're inhumane, they're immoral, they should not be there. Governments have even agreed that they shouldn't have them, but they're reluctant to give them up. So we picked on that one, and we say something people can do is actually look at, who is benefiting from those, and how do we shift that from the nuclear weapons corporations. So I'll just show you those here on the screen. There's not a lot of them. The corporations that are manufacturing nuclear weapons around the world, there's about 27 of them. Here's a list. And so we can look at these corporations, these are the public ones, and all of these corporations are on the stock market. So people are investing in those. They're investing in different ways. It could be our own investments through the stock market. It could be our bank is investing in these. It could be our university. Universities have endowment funds. It could be our religious organization. Religious organizations often have investment funds. It could be our city or our pension fund, or it could be our government. So we can look at all those different types of investments. I've just listed them down here on the right here. And we can say, we're going to stop investing in nuclear weapons. We can check with our bank. And if our bank is investing, we can shift to another bank. We can go to our university. And normally there's a social responsibility investment committee that is looking at university investment funds. And we can say, are you going to stop investing in university funds in nuclear weapons? We can go to our city and go to our city councillors and say, could you investigate the city funds? And this is now happening around the world as part of Move the Nuclear Weapons Money campaign. There are initiatives to divest from all these different areas. And at the federal government level, which you might imagine is the most difficult, we've got 4 governments have agreed to divest public funds from nuclear weapons. My own country, New Zealand, Norway, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. And the Swiss one has actually influenced the pension funds in Switzerland, which is multi-billion-dollar funds to stop investing in nuclear weapons. It's just small so far compared to the huge amount of money that's invested globally. But as this campaign picks up, this will become more of a powerful influence. And then this will help another area that we can work on, which is on the budgets. But this is more in the nuclear weapon states. So for example, in the United States, the Congress has the power of the purse. So in order to build nuclear weapons in the United States, the administration, the government has to go to the Congress, say, we want this amount of money for these nuclear weapon systems. So we can call on, if we're in the United States, our legislators to say no to funding new nuclear weapons. We can support bills like the one put forward by Senator Ed Markey, who's co-president of the organization that Jonathan Granoff and I helped co-found, and Senator Doug Roach was the founding chair. I think he's a participant in the webinar. I saw his name here. Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. Senator Markey is a leader of that, and he has an act in the US Congress called the SANE Act, S-A-N-E. That means Smarter Approach to Nuclear Expenditure, which calls for a drastic cutting in the nuclear weapons budget in order to fund instead renewable energies, health system, education. But at the moment, he can't get majority support in the Senate because the weapons corporations are so powerful. So that's where divestment is not just directed at the corporations itself, it's actually to help the initiatives that our legislators are taking, whether it's in the United States or in the United Kingdom. We have similar parliamentarians working in the United Kingdom to try and stop the renewal of the Trident nuclear weapon system. And they're saying that the cost of it is just atrocious. But again, the weapons corporations are so powerful. So divestment is something which we can do, and it can help the actions to cut the nuclear weapons budgets and to reallocate, that money into the things that we need it to go to. The other thing I think is to use social media. And we've seen that people are connecting a lot through social media. So we've come up with something in social media, and I'll just share screen again to show examples. We have them in the web page. I just have to get onto the share screen. Not that one. Sorry, I've shared the wrong one. I'm trying to share the web page. Oh, here it is. So here, for example, we call it a meme. It's a quote from someone on the issue of nuclear weapon spending. This is actually a former commander from the UK Navy saying that particularly in this time of pandemic, we should be scaling back nuclear weapons, not increasing, and cutting down on the plans for modernizing the nuclear weapons. I have another example. Sorry. Here, this is another example of a meme from Kenya, or Obama Manners. It's a niece of President Obama, and she was on a webinar yesterday that Kikishan was also a speaker, where we had a lot of youth voices speaking about nuclear disarmament and how that's important for youth. And I'm sorry, it's just the webinar is just in the way of the Facebook page. Again, here's one from Elegandi saying prevention is better than cure. You see, these statements that we're spreading on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram connect with people because there's a personal element to it. It's not just an idea, it's actually a person and a perspective, and it's another way of sharing. And I had another one here that I think I had. Here we have Douglas Roach, who was the founder of Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, talking about human security rather than military security, and that military couldn't stop COVID-19. So we welcome anyone who's on this webinar is welcome to create a quote on these issues, the connection between peace, disarmament, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the climate issues, and with a photo, and then we will help to share that around social media memes in order to share these ideas and build the hope and build the inspiration. Thank you.
Alan, and yeah, thank you for, well, first of all, for highlighting how much money that goes into the nuclear weapons and how all of that can just is more than enough for so many of the SDGs, actually all the SDGs as you mentioned. So thank you so much for your views, and thank you for sharing like how all people from all across the world are giving their views and why it's so important that we move towards nuclear disarmament. Thank you once again. Okay, and this brings us to our question and answer session, and I would like to thank all the panelists for your motivational insights on such an important topic. And I'm sure we will have many questions from our audience. So we will now open the floor for questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll be able to see you then. I would request that you please introduce yourself, state your name, where you're from, who your question is to, and then state your question. So our first question is from Senator Douglas Roach. So I've promoted you to a panelist. You will be able to ask your question here.
Doug, we should hear you if you go ahead and speak now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, thank you all. That's a wonderful panel, and showing how interconnected we are, even when we can't have a physical presence. I think that we have reached, through the COVID-19, a transformation moment in the world that is the same or even greater magnitude than the end of the Cold War moment. We need to recognize, as the panelists have said, how interdependent we are on one another, and that no amount of armies and no amount of nuclear weapons can keep us safe. And so I think that as I've been reflecting on this over the past number of weeks, how to bring to the political forefront the need for a common security agenda. And I think it needs to be presented in terms of our sheer humanity that is shown so clearly by the attack on that humanity by the virus, which knows no passport and no borders. So we are all vulnerable. And I think people can understand this. And so on the question of moving money from militarism to human security needs, I think a massive campaign should be launched, and Alan certainly has done a great deal to show in a vibrant way how gross these amounts of money are. But I think that if we can only get people to understand that by moving 10% of what we're spending on armaments, $1.9 trillion now, it's the highest it's been in the whole post-Cold War era. And 10% of that is $390 billion. And I think people can begin to understand what $390 billion would do for health, education, women's needs, all the community human security needs that are to a large extent represented by all the agencies and systems of the United Nations. We need to find a way to connect to the humanity that people are feeling, and the vulnerability that we're feeling at this very moment, in order to move the political system that has been afraid to challenge the military-industrial complex. It is the military-industrial complex that is criminally holding back humanity today. That is now being seen. And so I'm calling on the peace movements that are represented, certainly at this panel, and so many of our colleagues, to mobilize a strong grassroots campaign that politicians will feel. Move 10% of military spending to human needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you so much for your call to action, which is so critical and relevant in such trying times. So thank you once again. Would any of our panelists, do you have any comments or responses? Okay. So,
yeah, I want
yes.
to thank Douglas Roach so much for that, because that is a concept that can be understood by people. 10% of the military budget is not calling for eliminating all the military budget for those who would feel a little insecure to be able to give it up. You know, some countries like Costa Rica abolished their army and have been very well off. But most people don't yet feel that secure yet to be able to give it up all. So doing a 10% is, I think, realizable. It's manageable. People can understand the concept. It's about twice the nuclear weapons budget. So you could say if it's 10% globally, give up the nuclear weapons budget will be one part of it, and also give up some of the other spending on conventional weapons. You don't have to go into exact figures though. I think a 10% figure is very good. So I think it's a really good initiative, and definitely I'll be pushing that. So thank you, Doug.
I'd like to comment, if I might.
Sure.
Well, first I want to thank Doug Roach was a senator from Alberta for many years, and he was also a diplomat, he is an ambassador of Canada. So he doesn't speak from simply an academic environment, and of course he's also been a professor at the University of Alberta, and I think he's written, 17 books or something. So he doesn't speak without experience and realism here. There's one of the books that he wrote. It hits right in the sweet zone here, which is called Global Conscience, which is sort of, I think, very important in bringing about this shift in allocation of money. It's a matter. We have to phrase it as a matter of personal conscience, personal right and wrong, personal commitment. And in that regard, Bishop Swing has formed a group in the United Religions Initiative, which is the world's largest interfaith organization of literally millions of people engaged in interfaith dialogue. And one of the voices we have in that group is Voices for a Nuclear Weapons-Free World. And in that group, along with a lot of really grassroots-oriented activists and people, includes William Perry, former Secretary of Defense, George Shultz, who called for the abolition of nuclear weapons and still calls for it when he was Secretary of State. Several ambassadors who negotiated treaties addressing the issue. One, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which calls for the elimination of nuclear weapons. Ambassador Thomas Graham and Ambassador James Goodby. So we have a lot of people engaged in realism. Audrey Kitagawa, who's on the call, is one of the leaders of the Parliament of the World's Religions, which can reach into the religious community. So I think that we need to frame this not just as a utilitarian issue, that these money could be better spent in meeting our human needs. It's absolutely true. But there is a human need that has been neglected in our peace movement. It has been neglected in our disarmament movement. It's been neglected largely in the gender equity movement. It is the most important note in the orchestra. The most important note, the most important instrument in the orchestra is not the piano or the violin, it's the tuning fork. And the tuning fork for our being human is a conscience. That's what tunes us. And I think that we need to frame the issue of moving this money as an issue of conscience. We need to frame the issue of pursuing the golden rule amongst nations and ethics in international affairs and of values. We have seeded and allowed the more provincial and sectarian and divisive forces to grab the moral language. And I think that we've got to take it back and say, we want peace, not just for my religion or my nation or my group, but peace is universal, peace is for all. And that's what the human conscience says. So I think we need to make this call to move the money a call of conscience. And that's the secret sauce that we haven't effectively brought to the table that I think can make the big difference. And on this call today, we have what I would say is the voice of conscience in practice from the United Nations Environmental Institution. And we have leaders of interfaith religious institutions. We have people with enormous political experience. And this is the moment in which we need to get our message collectively, both the practical and the moral, more public. And this is an important phone. This is an important Zoom. We want to get this conversation scaled afterwards. It's worth keeping and sharing. And thank you for convening us for that purpose.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all the questions and comments. Yes, Madam Kitagawa?
Yes, so thank you so much for this very vibrant and dynamic conversation. And I thank all of the participants as well as the respondents who have come on so far. And I do agree with everything that's been said, especially by Jonathan, with respect to having the call to our conscience. And I think it's very important for people to also understand that the conscience can also be, kind of rise out of a strong ethical and moral foundation. So the golden rule was mentioned. It is, also the rule of reciprocity, to treat others as you would like to be treated. But it is grounded on the ethical principle of respect for each other, nonviolence, and never really, in effect, killing anybody's spirit, whether through our words, whether through our actions, or whether through our thoughts. And I did want to bring attention to the audience about the Parliament's global ethic. because it has 5 directives, and we have spoken a lot this morning about the importance of having values, having ethics, and having a kind of guidepost within ourselves from which we can direct our attention and in our daily contemplation of what really is important in life. So I just wanted to share with everyone the important 5 directives of the Parliament's global ethic, which I would like to have everyone refer to, and you can find that on the Parliament's website. And these important 5 directives are nonviolence and respect for life, solidarity and a just economic order. And this whole aspect about having a conscience of the money and transfer of some of the weapons budget, a nuclear weapons budget, 10% cutting it, and redirecting it speaks to that aspect. And tolerance and a life of truthfulness. And one of these most important spiritual principles, and Gandhi himself made that as an important aspect of his movement, was satyagraha, and that is truthfulness. Equal rights and partnership between men and women. So we also address the need for gender equality and stopping any kind of marginalization or abuse of half of the world's population. And finally, sustainability and care for the earth. So these directives were created out of a very involved and long consultative multilateral process that we engage with many ethicists and religious faith leaders from around the world. So this search for a common morality is an extremely important one. And ultimately, as I have shared extensively in my presentation this morning, it does devolve to the individual. So at all times, the responsibility of the individual to develop that spiritual discipline that allows us to turn the searchlight inward and to do the ceaseless, fearless self-examination to see how we ourselves must change to become better people in the transformation of our hearts to love, to develop caring, compassion, mindfulness, and kindness to others. I think these are very important principles for life. And as we move through life, the principles that we adhere to in our lives are what we bring into the world as we interact with it, and becomes a legacy of our very lives itself. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Kitagawa. Yes, Senator Roach?
I'd like to, for 1 minute, just conjoin the idea of conscience and global conscience with political action. It is quite true that there is a global conscience that has been awakened in the world, and it's shown in much of our actions in human rights, in the environment, economic and social development and control. We are living of a new global conscience. We should be aware of how that is empowering us. And I would like in this moment of immediacy to connect that to a pressing need to shore up, to strengthen the wonderful person who is heading the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. He has called for a global cease action, a ceasefire. That is a concrete step. It's in the same order as Boutros Ghali's Agenda for Peace of 1992. And Mr. Guterres needs the support of the world community, and he needs the support of Security Council. And it is unconscionable that one state on the Security Council has held up, refuses to agree to a resolution that would give full empowering support to Guterres' call for a ceasefire. And so if we have a conscience, and if the people in the United States will demonstrate the conscience that they feel, then perhaps the government concerned would take action in recognizing that there must be a commonality, a common ground position, in fighting the virus, and that we cannot let these petty distinctions that have held us back so long continue any longer. Now is a moment for transforming ourselves with a global conscience to press the political systems.
Thank you so much. We now move on to our next question, who is, okay, we have, all right, our next question is from Joshua. I am promoting you to a panelist.
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Joshua from Granoff, Oman. Thank you, panelists, for your inspiring words and inputs. My question is for Bishop Swing. Your organization has tremendous relevance in today's world that is becoming increasingly polarized. What was the inspiration behind you starting this movement?
Thank you, Bishop Swing.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, the United Nations was the inspiration for me. I got a telephone call from the United Nations saying they'd like to come to San Francisco and have a big celebration of their 50th anniversary, and they'd like to come to Grace Cathedral. And they asked me to host, and I said yes. And they wanted to have all the nations of the world there and all the religions of the world there. And I began to think nations and religions. And I was thinking the nations of the world have met every day for 50 years to struggle together for global good. And the religions of the world have not gotten together for 1 minute in 50 years. And I was thinking, who's more moral for the religions or the nations? And nations sometimes aren't very good, but religions, I thought, are worse. I thought if there's a United Nations, someday there's got to be some kind of united religions. So it's either going to happen with the United Nations with people at the top of religion or with the grassroots people. And I learned that it's not going to happen at the top of religion. It'll happen with the grassroots. And sure enough, there are people of all the religions of the world who understand that they're brothers and sisters of each other, and they would like to solve problems together. There's a big heart out there in the world. There's just a great common humanity that people innately understand. And if you give them a chance to work together to solve for problems, it changes the world. So I started out with just the vision of the United Nations got me going about united religions.
Thank you so much, Bishop Swing, and thank you, Joshua. We now have our next question from, let's see, Tanya Islam. I am promoting you to a panelist. Tanya, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello, everyone. I am Tanya Islam from Bangladesh. Thank you so much to all the panelists. My question is to Madam Kitagawa. You are such an inspiration to everyone, especially to men and girls. So how did you start working on peace building, and what advice would you have for someone who wants to start working on peace building?
Thank you, Tanya. Madam Kitagawa.
Thank you. I had to unmute my phone. Thank you so much for that question. We have some of the biggest, most well-connected peace builders right here on this panel. So please feel free to contact us to see how you can, be directed to any of our organizations or the resources that we have through our networks on how you can be a direct participant in any of the peace building initiatives. And there are many initiatives that are going on all around the world with respect to interfaith dialogue, reconciliation work, and peace building work. And I also mentioned, and you're a very young lady, the importance of youth in being part of the whole peace building effort. And you have a real important role to play and to bring in your own fresh ideas on how we can have the youth participate in our public commons and moderate between the public-private spheres of the lives of all citizens. So we look to our youth to be the next generation to help us with this transition, as well as a transformation of our collective consciousness and action. And this is why it's also very important that Kekeshan is directing and is the founder of this foundation. And I think her organization will be well suited for you to connect with. And how I personally became involved in peacekeeping and aspects of gender equality, etc., that I consider to be the personal grace of the divine in my life to awaken my spiritual heart to see the importance of being able to develop and cultivate a connection to what is sacred, what is divine, because I was told many, many years ago by a very enlightened person that God is love. And so if you accept that God is love, then everything that you do must arise from that premise. And she also said that God is within you, the closest of all. Every heartbeat you have is the heartbeat of God. Every breath you take is the breath of God. The very life you have is a sacred gift from the divine. Therefore, we are all imbued with that sacred aspect of ourselves that is love itself. So we cannot help but understand in the participation of our lives in daily life, in daily society, in all of our interactions, every loving thought, every loving word, and every loving action arises from that divine source. And if we undertake that inner journey and explore the truth of that, then there is no other way we can conduct ourselves in life but with love, compassion, and kindness.
Thank you so much, Madam Kitagawa, and thank you, Tanya, for your question. Our next question is from Pragna Vasupal. I am promoting you to a panelist. I do not know where Pragna has gone to. Okay, yes, here she is.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you to all the panelists. I am Pragna from Dubai. My question is to Dr. Iyad. The Faith for Earth initiative that you have started is so meaningful in the current times. How far do you think it will be effective if the young people are not educated about it?
Thank you, Pragna. Dr. Iyad?
Well, thank you very much for this question, and thank you for giving me the floor to talk about Faith for Earth. In fact, we have created a movement within the UN. The movement is the engagement with faith leaders and faith-based organizations, especially on environmental issues and the issues that are existential to our lives and our well-being. Now the train has already left the station and it's moving fast. I wouldn't keep a secret that yesterday I received a call from the Office of the Secretary General of the UN Secretary General asking the Faith for Earth to take part in their climate action task force. So it started as an initiative to bring faith leaders together to discuss and to have a voice in the policy making arena of UN environment, which is our Environment Assembly. But now our next step is to upgrade the initiative to a global coalition. And we have submitted our request to the legal offices of the UN. Now, the coalition will be composed of 4 pillars. One of them is the Council of Eminent Faith Leaders. So we want the faith leaders of the world to come, whether we can meet physically or digitally, to voice one key interfaith message to humanity, that we are all in this together, regardless of our faiths and beliefs. The second important council is the Council of Young People, or the Council of Youth, because we know that the power and the future lies in your hands. You are actually changing the future already today. So you have the power, and we want to mobilize your power in the service of humanity. The third pillar is we need to bridge the gap and the divide between the science and the theology, or religious teachings and texts. There is a unique commonality of understanding between sciences and religions, which is environment and the stewardship of the environment. So we want to bridge the gap between the sciences and theology or religious studies. And the fourth council is with eminent leaders, such as the group that we have, is the CEOs, the leaders of faith-based organizations who do have offices across the world. They exist in every corner of the world. They can reach to the marginalized, to the local farmers and women who are striving to have a sustainable living. So those pillars, and as I mentioned, the young people being at the center of all of this, is the next step for our engagement as UNEP on Faith for Earth. So hopefully, we're hoping by the end of this year, if things go well, we will be announcing the coalition, and we will be establishing the first youth council on environmental issues and linking, of course, religions and beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pragna. Given time constraints, I will now request all the people who do have any remaining questions to please email it to us, and we would be happy to send the questions to our panelists. But thank you so much for all your amazing questions, and we are so glad that we were able to have this discussion. I would now like to request all our panelists to give their concluding remarks. So we would go in the same order that we went with. So Madam Kitagawa, you can start, please.
My concluding remarks are remarks of gratitude, to know that there are incredible people in the world who are working extremely hard every day that they live to help to move this important aspect of transformation in the confluence of our evolution of conscience and consciousness. And we have such important leaders of that movement right here with us this morning. I am humbled and privileged to be with each of you. And I am humbled and privileged to hear our participants and to know that you are interested in this broadcast, and that we look to you for your continued participation, support, and help, and my deepest expressions of appreciation to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Kitagawa. Bishop Swing?
Yes, I was thinking, we're talking about what life's going to be like at the end of the virus. I'm sure that the virus is going to be here for a long time. We're not just living to get to that place, we're going to be in this place for a long, long time. And therefore, we need to start now to make the big change. It's not later we're going to have a change. We're going to be in this coronavirus stuff for a very long time. And life is going to be very scary for a lot of people. And therefore, we've got to make our decisions now about the kind of world we want to live in. That's it.
Thank you so much, Bishop. Sir Jonathan?
Well, let me reiterate a sense of gratitude for convening us and for your responding to the call of conscience within yourself to step forward and do this and bring together so many people in so many good ways. It's pretty simple. We will either be in pieces or we will be in peace. And this moment in history makes this choice unavoidable. This is something that's unavoidable. We will develop a vaccine or a cure for this virus. We may even develop a cure for cancer. We will not develop a cure for the disease of time, the symptom of which is death. This is a reality. Every one of us has a termination point. So the question is, what do we do during this period of time in which we're gifted with the manifestation of the gift of life? I think that there is life after death, but that's a different issue that's not for this discussion. But the question is, what do we do with the life that we're here? Do we bring the call of conscience, which is so clear at this moment, for the unity of the human family, for bringing messages of peace and policies of peace into practice? Or do we sit back and forget about the challenges that are, for the first time in human history, both local and global? First time, first generation which we could end human life. 300 years ago, if somebody said, let's melt the polar ice cap, let's get together and figure out how to change the climate of the planet to make human beings unable to live here. They couldn't do it. But we've organized ourselves with an amazing industrial machine that's doing it. Somebody said, let's blow up all the cities in the world and destroy the ability of, a mere 100 nuclear weapons could destroy the capacity of agriculture by putting millions of tons of soot into the stratosphere. Let's organize and end the human endeavor. Couldn't do it, but we're spending huge amounts of money to do it today. So while we have this moment of life, this precious moment of life, I say to my brothers and sisters listening, think about how to bring those deepest values into action. And I assure you that the same voice within you that creates a caring, that awakens love in your heart, will guide you in this endeavor. And don't settle for anything less. If you're a teacher, you can do it in your classroom. If you're a parent, you can do it with your children. If you have any moral agency in a democracy, demand that your political leaders express these values. If you're a religious leader, bring it into your sermons. If you're just sitting alone, bring it into your heart. We will either be pursuing divisions amongst ourselves, pieces, or we will be abiding in the gift of the divine peace.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Our next speaker, Dr. Iyad.
Well, again, I would like to reiterate the word of gratitude to you personally, to your foundation, and to all the eminent speakers. And my final and brief statement is that I would like to call upon young people to go back to the preamble of the United Nations Charter. What does it say? It says, we, the peoples of the United Nations, determined. It is not the government who determine. It's not the countries, not the politicians. It's the United Nations people. So we, the people, can determine now. We can transform our future into a future that we determine to have. We can determine and go out there and ask for the redirecting of the resources that are spent, the millions and trillions and billions of resources that are spent on arms and nuclear weapons, to be invested in the sustainable living of the people. So keep calling, keep advocating, and keep determining your future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad. Last but not the least, Alan.
Thank you very much again, Kekoshan, for bringing some more seasoned voices onto a panel today. And I re-emphasized, the importance of also listening to the youth voices, as we did yesterday with the youth webinar you were on, and the next youth webinar coming up on May the 19th on youth voices for climate, peace and disarmament. I want to reaffirm what a number of the panelists have been saying about connecting love and consciousness with politics. I think that is really important, because that is how we're going to build a future that will be sustainable and will be one of peace. And there are a number of ways of doing that. I mean, we're doing that with our network of parliamentarians for nuclear, non-proliferation and disarmament. That despite the title, which is focused on disarmament, it's really parliamentarians who have a core heart connection to peace for the planet and for the future. And disarmament is just the entry point that they're coming in to connect with each other, but they're also working on actions on these other aspects as well. But I also want to reaffirm again the UN Charter and come to the next part of the preamble, because the UN, to me, when it was founded, was an example of heart and hope coming into politics. It was like a phoenix rising out of the ashes of the Second World War, the devastation of the war, and then the understanding at that time that we should never repeat that. And so the next part of the preamble says that we, the peoples, are determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, and also to advance economic and social development for all. Right there is the connection between peace, disarmament, the end of war, and equality and social development. It's a core part of the UN Charter. It was a vision that was at the center at the beginning, but of course other politics has got in the way. Vested interests of corporations involved in fossil fuel industries or involved in the weapons industry. So we're in the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. It's a time of reflection, and how do we take forward this common security mechanism institution that we have, that has got many people who are doing wonderful things there, and it's got many opportunities for us to engage, to take forward that core vision, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, and to advance economic and social development for all. So we have an opportunity to bring that back into the dialogue that's happening around the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, and take these forward at that level, along with the other levels, whether working with our own parliaments, with our own city councils, with our own religious communities, with our other networks that we're taking forward. But don't forget the UN. It's been undermined in some of the media. It's been blamed for mistakes that have been made from others. We are, in a sense, well placed to be able to defend and demonstrate the wonderful things that can be done through an institution like the United Nations, which gives voice and a platform for the peoples of the world to work together on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. And thank you to all the panelists for this such an insightful and thought-provoking discussion that reiterated the critical and overwhelming importance of peace in the current days and in the days ahead. A lot still needs to be done, but there is hope for the future, and only through our collective efforts can we actually rise above this current situation and build back better for a world where no one is left behind. So on that note, we will conclude our webinar. We hope to meet you someday again in person soon. Please stay safe, everyone. And thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kekashan. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.